The production, use, and disposal of plastics packaging, particularly in the single-use variety, is having a serious negative impact on our planet, from endangering wildlife on land and in the oceans to entering the food chains and exacerbating climate change. And the problem is accelerating as the production of plastic packaging continues to increase while recycling and reuse infrastructure remains inadequate. It got lost. Oh. Corey Berends will discuss the current challenges posed by plastic packaging and the efforts to resolve them, which require the active participation of all shareholders. And one set of shareholders is us, the public. Corey has a BS and an MS degrees in packaging engineering from Michigan State University and a PhD in food science and technology from Virginia Tech University. He has worked in the consumer packaged goods industry for over 25 years, focusing on research and development. Berends is currently the CEO of Footprint, a material science company working on the development of sustainable packaging solutions. The reason Corey is here is his mother and his parents live in the same condo development that I do, and his mother and I conspired to get him here.
Yeah.
So without further ado, Corey.
Bill, thank you. Okay, well, thank you for having me. Bill, thanks for that. Mom, thanks for inviting me. So, I think about a year ago. So I'm thrilled to be here today. It's a gorgeous day. I appreciate you guys taking some time to come inside and listen to a little bit of what you can see up here. So hopefully leave today a little bit more educated. I hope to leave more educated with some of the questions you have and thoughts you have as well. But I'm going to talk about this challenge we have. We'll jump into it. I will just add a couple of other things. So Bill told me I could not promote our company. So you won't see that in here, but I did wear the shirt. So, Footprint is the reason I'm so passionate about this space and this topic is that Footprint's it's a tech company in the material science space, and we're headquartered down in Gilbert, Arizona, right outside of Phoenix. The company's about 10 years old, and we've got facilities in Mexico and in Poland because Europe's got the same issues we have here in North America. But the company's heavily invested in technology, which you'll see a theme in here about. That's where I believe some of the biggest solutions are going to have to come is investment in tech to create solutions that mimic single-use plastics, both in performance and in cost, and then to life. It's got to be much better, obviously, than plastic. But that's the journey we're on as a company. I've been there about 2 years, and this is what the mission we focus on every day is: healthy planet, healthy people. And so you'll see and hear a little bit of some of the stuff we're doing, but again, you won't see the company name on there. But at least you'll see if I can get this to go forward. I wanted to start with just a little bit of inspiration. So you can see my parents up there. So they spend the winter in Texas, and you can see the beach behind them. And I know my parents take walks on the beach every single day. I was there, what was it? Last winter. We took a walk down the beach, and you can see in the lower left-hand corner down here is a white plastic container. It's like a gallon ice cream tub type thing, or a margarine container. You can see bite marks out of that. That's from turtles. And they think it's jellyfish. So it's just one small example of the issues that this creates. And when you see the size of the patches that are sitting in our oceans, things like this, are challenging, because once turtles consume this and they consume enough of it, it's fatal. So it's just one example that you see every single day walking the beaches, being on the oceans. And that's the stuff that doesn't get in the landfills, that gets in the oceans. And then on the lower right here in the middle, you can see my daughter who's here, Sophia. So obviously my daughter, but she's a diver and going to college this fall at a school that's focused on oceans and wildlife and marine life on the Gulf Coast. And she's passionate about it. She got certified a few years ago. become my dive buddy. And so we travel around and dive. And, you know, another reason I'm doing this is to try and keep things like this from seeing it when you're underwater. If you are a diver or avid around the lakes or the oceans, unfortunately, you see more and more of this than you want to. So we've got a big challenge on our hands, but a big opportunity to fix it as well. Oops. Okay, so we're going to just talk 3 topics today. I want to talk a little bit about kind of frame up the problem for everybody so you can understand kind of the magnitude of what we're dealing with. We'll talk a little bit about the challenges with that waste and plastic waste that's out there. And again, the focus of this is plastic. There's a lot of other challenges that we have in the environment, clearly, but today we're going to focus on plastic. And then what some of the technologies and opportunities are that we can all play a role in trying to solve these. And I'll give you some examples. Sound good? All right. So I can get the right side of this. Oh, I gotta go back. Where's Amy? See if I go on this side. There we go. Okay. So you guys have probably seen the stat before. It's real. So anybody have any idea how many millions of metric tons of plastic we think will be in the ocean in 2050 that will outweigh fish? Anybody? 260 million metric tons. And we're well on our way, and I think we'll probably end up beating that unless we do something. So clearly, oh man. Okay. So a few other stats for you. This clearly is a massive threat to our planet and frankly to the human race. You can see just some stats down here, but 14 million tons of plastic waste every single year, and that number is going up, not down. If you think about that, that's when you see the big trash truck drive by, that's dumping one full load of trash from that trash truck in the ocean every minute is what that equates to. It's incredible. From the 1950s, the last time back when we started tracking this, and recycled only 9% of the trash, which is a plastic pollution, which is about 8.3 billion tons. It's been produced since 1950. Only 9% has been recycled globally. 12% has been incinerated. It's the latest stats that we have. So the rest of that, landfills, oceans, other places. And then 1.8 billion contribution of the plastics industry every year of greenhouse gases. So 3.4% of all the greenhouse gases that go into the atmosphere every year from plastic production via fossil fuels. So see if I can get the right one this time. There we go. So this just gives you a little bit of an idea too. You guys hear about the great garbage patch in the ocean? There's actually 5 of them. The largest one's in the Pacific. It's 2 times the size of Texas. What you can see visibly on the surface only represents about 2% of the trash. That's the plastic trash that's in that patch. The rest of it sinks to the bottom of the ocean and flows around what they call these gyres that are currents in the ocean that kind of keep this trash together. So it's essentially a column of trash. The vast majority of it is underwater. You can't see. So you can see here too the different countries. It's a little bit misleading because what you see in the Philippines really is coming from China, but it's flowing outside of Asia through the Philippines and then into the oceans. 99% of the trash that contributes to this is coming from 10 rivers. 5 of those out of China, a few out of Africa. But the trash starts on the mainland, obviously gets into rivers, flows out into the ocean. You can see the magnitude here. Yeah. Tons of trash, metric tons of trash. I can repeat the questions. That's easier.
What do the numbers represent?
Yeah, good question. So that's metric tons of trash.
Produced by each of those countries,
Well,
or
that's
that
what's
ends
a
up
little
at their
bit-
shores?
The latter. So it's generally flowing through those countries. So the Philippines isn't actually producing that much, clearly, but it's coming from Asia.
Okay.
And so it flows through the Indian Ocean, out through the Philippines into the Pacific.
And the USA is just part of rest of the world?
Right. Now, again, what's misleading is, as we all know, we've shipped for years a lot of our waste to China. Just in the last few years, they stopped accepting it. So we're a bigger contributor than what's represented on here, but you can kind of see it's really where the outflow comes that contributes to these. Okay, good question. Oh, man. Bill, eventually I'm going to get the right button. Okay. Couple questions for you guys. So you can see a bunch of common single-use plastics up here, which is, again, one of the biggest challenges we have. So first question, how many millions of tons of plastic do we think is still manufactured and produced every year? Millions of tons. 400 million tons is produced every year, and it's growing every year, which is one of the biggest challenges we have. Instead of it going the other direction, because we're coming up with new technologies, new solutions, we're all behaving differently, supposedly, that number should be going down, but it's going up every single year. Continue to produce. Half of that plastic that's produced is single-use plastics. Use one time and dump. You can ask, I can repeat it if you want. Yeah.
And it seems to me that the easiest one might be the plastic grocery bag. We lived for a while in Oregon. Oregon and California, they charge 10 cents a bag. When you go in the store, you never get a free bag anywhere.
Right.
Do you think that is a good solution, and why aren't they doing it in the rest of the country?
It's a great solution. And I would tell you, if you go to Europe, their recycling rate in Europe, country dependent, is north of 75, 80%. Here in the US, we're like 20%. They have implemented those, so you can't find a grocery store in Europe that uses those one-time use throwaway bags. You have to bring your own bag, or they'll provide you with a bag. Most people, if you walk around Europe, you'll see that they have essentially like a fiber-based net that they carry their groceries in, and that's what they reuse. So we'll get to more of that as we get going in this, but I would tell you that those are the simple things we can do that we should demand and expect. And I'll help you with that. We're promoting that all the time. And I think those, again, to your point, that's the easiest thing up here to go solve. Plastic straws, another one. We don't need to use straws for most things. And if you do, there's other solutions outside of plastic. How long do you think these things last in the environment? Ocean, landfill. What would you guess? Couple hundred years. Good. Yep. So I can tell you the diapers. If you guys were in diapers, they're probably still out here somewhere. So mine were. I know mine are probably still out here. So I'll show you some of the stats in here. I think I've got it on the next slide. You can see it's incredible. 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 Yeah.
I think where some items that we recycle aren't really accepted for recycling. Is that a problem? You think, like I've read where there's certain plastics that have numbers on them.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't have that number and you put it in your recycle bin, it's going to end up in the ocean anyway.
Yeah. It's exactly right. And I think so we got a couple issues with recycling. We'll talk a little bit more about recycling. One, I don't know if you guys recall all the numbers on there, but they're not easy to understand. They're hard to find, right? They're hard to find. And when you do find it, you're like, okay, I guess this is recyclable, but then you got to wash it out. You got to separate it. Recycling is a challenge. The other challenge is, as you guys probably see in the news, and it's real, oftentimes you put things in a recycle container, they don't end up being recycled. The cost to recycle in this country is enormous. We don't have the infrastructure to support it all. So it's still the right thing to do, because there's still a decent amount that eventually gets to places it gets reused in a different way. But yeah, I think that the key thing for there is to enable recycling of the package itself, it has to fit one of those numbers. And so what we have to push on as an industry, as a population, with legislatures, is to push to make sure that companies are creating packaging that has a number on there that can be easily recycled and doesn't have to be separated, broken down, or different things done to it. So if that answers your question, but yeah, it's a challenge. And we'll talk a little bit more about recycling. But yeah, this is incredible. So if you think about the 8.3 billion tons that has been produced since 1950, and you think half of that single use, used one time, all of this stuff, all that 8.3 billion X, maybe 12% that's been incinerated is out here somewhere in the planet. But it's not all, we'll get to some positive things, but this is, again, just sets context for, I think, the problem we have to all go solve together. So microplastics, you probably heard about those. Those are things that are 5 millimeters or less, or nanoplastics, which are micron size. The challenge with plastics, and even like we talked about the ocean plastics, a lot of that stuff is not visible. So microplastics, you can see the larger size of microplastics, but you often can't see the smaller ones, and they're hard to collect. They are the biggest issue with the marine life, even though you see pictures of this turtle with the straw in his nose, which is, you know, graphic and terrible. You see wildlife with rings for beverage containers around their necks, things like that. But the way bigger problem is ingestion of the microplastics by seafood. So big seafood companies, Bumblebee and others, are all working to figure out how to create solutions for those, because all of those things that get in the water are being, a lot of them is being absorbed into and consumed by marine life. Yes.
But I'm wondering, when fish particularly are farm raised,
Mhm.
are they protected from that, or does the water move in regardless of whether or not they're trying to protect it?
I would say that they would have a lot less chance. I mean, it's ubiquitous to some extent. They're finding nanoplastics, microplastics in the Alps. They're finding at the bottom of the valleys of the ocean. They're finding them in your, maybe not you, me, probably, in my arteries, right? The New England Journal of Medicine just did a research project, and about half of the individuals in that had microplastics or nanoplastics in their arteries. So it's getting everywhere. So we've got to stop it. So you can see here. And so the health risks, they haven't been able to, there's still a lot of research going on what the ultimate human impact is. Microplastics, we don't know. There's research that are suggesting that there's issues, but clearly if it's showing up in your body at some point, it's going to become a problem. Okay. A couple other things, you know, we think about the issue, and then there's a cost associated with this. So we talked a little about fossil fuels and the greenhouse gases getting into the environment. EPR, I don't know if you guys know, EPR is extended producer responsibility. So this is new as of about 5-6 years ago. What the government's trying to do is hold big companies responsible for their containers that either can't be recycled or can ultimately end up in landfills. And so they're charging them. The reason they're doing that, get some money to help pay for infrastructure recycling, but the other reason is to incent companies to change. That's one of the things they're doing with this thing called EPR, and it's extended to every industry that produces anything related to plastics. Waste management costs $32 billion a year around the world to manage recycling, to collect it, to sort it, to try and put it into some reuse form. $32 billion a year. $15 billion a year for cleanup efforts. So you hear people, companies like 4Ocean, they're fairly popular. They sell bracelets and other things that they use to fund their work. Those are the types of organizations that there's a lot of them around the world. They're fairly prominent. Their impact, unfortunately, today is pretty minimal, but we're spending $15 billion around the world for cleanup efforts, to clean up the plastic, reduce the trash that's in the oceans. And then the GDP is being impacted. So the last stat I saw a couple of years ago was about $7 billion loss, gross domestic product, by coastal nations due to people not going there due to trash or impact on marine life. So the cost is astronomical, and that doesn't count anything related to what we might find out on health and other issues. So I promise you I'm going to get to some positive stuff. Okay. But kind of we get inspired to change. So it's like, if this isn't a call to action, I don't know what is. So recycling, you asked a little bit about recycling. It's a significant challenge today. If you go across the US, and previous company I worked for, I spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill trying to encourage policy change to get recycling centers stood up around the country. Again, it's not the ultimate solution, but it is a part of the solution. But there's a bunch of debate and challenges there's big landfill companies, waste management companies, they make money with trash. So recycling is not a money winner for them. So there's a bunch of debate going back and forth. We're trying to get the industries aligned to change this. So we are making progress. There is progress being made. But I would tell you, we still want to continue to recycle, but we have to have the materials that go into those recycling centers simple, not multi-layer, not things that they can't separate, really simple to reduce the cost. And then we've got to invest more and more recycling centers around the world. Things like AI will be a positive thing for recycling. They'll be able to identify different materials, sort them more robotically. There's a big cost to that, but that's where the investment's coming and happening. But we have to continue to make sure we do that. So let's talk about solutions to this, so we can get the left side of this to look more like the right side. So a couple of things. You can see, you don't have to read any of this, but legislation is a big part of the solution. We talked about this extended producer responsibilities, multi-modal piece of that. But you can see around the globe, there's a lot of policy change being put in place. I would say from the United States, North America, we're way behind. In particular, countries in Europe who are way ahead of the game. So in Europe, they've got what they call the Single-Use Plastics Directive. You can look it up, SUPD. And they just implemented that. And so any single-use plastic, there's fines for the retailer. So if you go to a coffee shop and you want to buy a cup of coffee, even this, because there's plastic in this, or a regular cup that may be plastic, but they get charged 50 cents for every single cup of coffee that leaves their establishment on the go. So that's pretty material. You think about how many cups of coffee are sold every day. And they're starting to pass that on to consumers, which they don't want to do because it disincents them from coming and buying coffee from them, but that's what they're going to have to do. So what those companies, and we're working with a number of them, and a number of our industry partners are as well, to try to find solutions aggressively. So policy can play a big role, and you can see all the different legislation that's happening. My wish for, and what we're pushing with on Capitol Hill, is to try to create more alignment, because to have different policies in different countries that doesn't support kind of individual intent and objectives makes it hard to solve a bigger problem. Because this is a problem for us. It's not a problem for one country. Yeah.
Well, even in the United States, we go to Georgia in the winter and they don't recycle anything. So how can we get just the country to come on board as and have a uniform recycling policy? That's
the push, and it's been a challenge. I would say there's been progress being made. What I would also tell you, though, is recycling is again, we need to do it, and we need to make the infrastructure better, but it's not the ultimate solution. Because we'll talk in a minute about end of life. So at some point, a single-use plastic container, you might be able to recycle it, reuse it one more time in something else, but then that's it. Its properties are gone, but the impact on the environment's the same. So we need to recycle, but we ultimately need to find some better solutions. But the good news here is every single country around the globe is participating in driving change. And it's the type of thing that we need to continue to do. The other thing that's driving change is all of you. You can see on the left here, these are things that were shopping purchase behavior. And I would bet this data is from 3.5, 4 years ago. If we were to redo this data, those numbers would all be higher because awareness continues to grow. On the right side is expectations you all have for your companies that you buy products from. So there's consumer pull or change, which we need. These are companies. This is just a few in the food and beverage space that we work directly with our company, but you guys recognize all of these up here, I would guess. They're all huge, big suppliers of single-use plastic containers. And they're all committed to making change. So between legislation, behavior change from all of us, companies committing to making change and investing in change, that hasn't all happened for years. That's in the last 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. We're starting to see more and more momentum. What's really good too is some of the companies who made commitments 5, 6 years ago that they just made a commitment because their investors wanted to hear a commitment and they're not actually following through on that, are now getting called out. And which is exactly what needs to happen. And so the good news is they are looking for solutions and they're now investing in the technology required to go make those things happen because it's going to be a journey. The good news is we've got some opportunities and some paths forward to do it. One last thing on recycling and reuse. I just use these two companies as an example. There's a bunch of them out there, but these two in particular are terrific. Their founders, owners are committed to driving change. The one nice thing about, if you think about recycling and where that package is going to go next, things like clothing or gear are great examples because those will last a long time. And that they don't have to be recycled again, and then they end up next time in a landfill. So there's a lot of companies that are doing a lot of good in reuse of plastic that are coming out of recycling centers. They're also investing in technology so they can use different types of materials that they couldn't use 3, 4, 5 years ago. So that's all improving. So reuse will continue to be, oh, did it again, Bill, an important piece in here. Fiber technology. So this is what we do, our company. There's other companies too that do it. And we have to work with some of those companies to all help each other. This looks pretty simple. Like just take what used to be a black plastic polyester container in a frozen meal and make it into fiber. Seems simple. It's really hard. And why it's really hard is because that fiber has to perform like plastic or better, meaning when it's going down a production line and you're putting meals into it, and you're putting a highly acidic sauce, and now you're freezing it in an environment, you have a lid, a seal on it that's got to maintain the integrity of it. It's got to be distributed to a retailer through frozen distribution and still remain sealed and hold that container. And then it goes through freeze thaw at a retailer. It goes through freeze thaw in your freezers. Then you want to put it in an oven or a microwave. You can't have that highly acidic sauce or whatever it might be leak through on your clothes. You won't be very happy as you're eating a TV dinner, watching TV. So it's challenging. It took a number of years to develop these types of technologies. The good news is they're now becoming more ubiquitous. So there's a lot of companies that are making changes like this now. And we're actively working to continue to improve costs, which is another incentive to get big companies to move. But all those things we talked about earlier, now that we've got solutions, we've got pull from consumers, we've got a pull from legislators, and we've got so to keep these things moving. So we're super excited about it. But the solutions now are in place. We just got to get more people. Yeah. Question was where the fiber comes from and what it is. We use a couple different types of fibers. Well, I'll call it the industry does. Other people doing these types of things use different kinds of fibers. We use some recycled fiber. So we could use, and again, it depends on the application. Could use newsprint. We could use corrugated boxes. We'll use those. A lot of ours is virgin fiber, either softwood or hardwood from renewable forests. But we use those and then we'll blend them with some things to get them to think of a bird's nest, to get them to work together in a way that create the kind of barrier properties you need. And then you form them in a specific way under the right heat and pressure to create a container that keeps out liquids, allows it to go through freezing and microwave. Is that answer your question? Yeah.
Well, is it a bigger disincentive for use of the fiber-based technology, the cost or the performance of the product?
I would say the cost is probably the thing that's most concerning to a lot of companies. The reason is because we're we're now able to solve the performance things. The performance things were like a non-starter. If you couldn't get it to survive, or it was going to leak, it was or wasn't going to seal, it's a non-starter. And then the cost comes in, and the cost becomes now is the thing that we're working with. What I remind our industry partners, some of the companies you saw up there, it took the plastics industry 50 years to get their cost where they are today. This is new tech. It's going to take us time as an industry, as suppliers, to be able to get technology in a way that can get to the cost where plastic is. On the benefit side, this is cool to the touch. It doesn't break. The other significant, and it's obviously biodegradable, you go throw this in the ocean, it'll disintegrate. Which is good. Another question, go ahead. We're still higher cost. And I would say it's on average between 30 to 60%. It depends on what it is. But if you look at the cost of a package compared to the total proposition, it's still a small amount. But the other thing that these have done, and I'll show you some more examples, the companies that are providing these are also charging more, right, to all of us. So they're charging a little bit more, and their business is growing with it. So the value proposition for them is significant, because we all want sustainable solutions. We all are willing to pay a little bit more for sustainable solutions. So if it's another 20 cents, most people are like, yeah, I'll do that to cover the cost. So
are there some plastic products that can't be made with recycled plastic, that you have to use virgin plastic for them?
there are. Yeah, I mean, that's the ultimate challenge, why technology is so important, because part of it's the cleanliness of the stream coming in. It's hard to find plastic. You don't know where it's been. You may have to add a lot of cost to it to get it clean and sterile. So most products that are in contact with food or beverages directly are virgin for plastic, and generally same for fiber. The one on the right, I can repeat your question if you want. Hold that question. The question was, how does this compare to polylactic acid and other bioplastics? I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So great question. The one on the right, real quick. I don't think if you guys all use the plastic containers for the for plants, go to Lowe's or Home Depot or Walmart, you go buy all that stuff. So again, there's a lot of tech in this. This replaces all that. You just drop this whole thing in your garden. You don't have to throw any plastic away. You don't have to throw this away. It just composts with your plant. So there are companies like Rootmaker and other big companies. This is a massive industry. It's a huge contributor to single-use plastics. You wouldn't think about it, but think of all those times you rip that off and throw it in your garbage. But these prevent mold. They manage moisture. There's a lot of tech in this stuff. But again, big solutions. These are just a couple examples. Yeah, go ahead.
I hear you say we all want.
Yeah.
Has any research been done on that? Because in my experience, an educated group,
yeah,
or an upper economic group, or even middle economic group has a far different outlook on whether this is necessary and whether they're willing to pay even 10 cents.
Yeah.
So has any research been done on how Americans particularly really perceive the need for this?
Well, so that's the research I showed up there earlier. There's general support. Those numbers are increasing. So there's a lot of support now. What people say they're willing to do versus what they do oftentimes are not the same. I said, I'm going to exercise today. I didn't. So to your point, I agree with you. What's interesting though, is we are seeing behavior change. So when products like this or others get in the market that are replacement and more sustainable, you're seeing growth in those spaces, and you're seeing share loss from companies that haven't converted those. Now, a broader point in question, if you go to all the coastal communities around the world, some that have challenged economically, they are at the highest risk and have the biggest problem. It's not just plastic, but it's water, it's climate, it's all kinds of things that are impacting them the most. So they need this more than anybody, and that's where the government and subsidies and other things can step in. There's a lot of nonprofit type organizations that we support and others do to help those communities. So to your point, the cost gonna have to come from somewhere. There's a lot of countries that can't afford that, but they're being hit the worst. So, yeah. Anything done on a mass scale to bring non-believers? I think, yeah, I mean, I think so. And what I would say is what the data has been showing still is that there's the vast majority are on board with change has to happen. The vast majority are. Now, there's still, maybe to your point, there's a handful of folks who are like, I'm not gonna make that choice. I'm gonna buy something that's less expensive. That's okay. That's where the technology has to come in, and we have to continue to find ways to take cost out, do things less expensively, find different material sources. You'll see a few things in here that we're trying to do to make that happen as an industry. But it's a good point. And I think back to your question, that's the pressure and tension in this. A lot of this is new tech, and the costs are more to implement these things, and trying to balance how and where we pay for those will continue to be a challenge, but it's going to improve over time. So people won't have to make those choices eventually. Like, that is the only option. And by the way, it costs you what it used to cost you. And that's what we're all trying to achieve. Yeah.
I understand so much of this is coming from the 10 rivers that you identified.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you know how much of this is dumped off of cruise ships or container ships or fishing trawlers, and if there's any way to regulate that.
I don't know. It's a great question. I mean, we hear about it and you see it. I don't know what the contribution is. I know that they've regulated it. Now, is everyone following the regulation? We probably don't know. But I know that they've made changes to allowing that. They used to allow it. They don't anymore. I know the military was one of the biggest contributors for a long time, and now they've got an entire system set up on how that they offload trash, where they take it, what they do with it, how they manage it. So that's changing within the military, and they were one of the biggest. But more work to do. But yeah, good question. Yeah. In what way? It's a great question. I wish I had a great answer for you. I would tell you that from where I sit, we've had challenges with them too, working with them in certain ways, trying to leverage even some of their supply base to build products like this and things like that just to get them. But it's a challenge. It's challenged. What I would say, if you go back to that legislation slide, there's a lot of legislation been implemented there. Now, is it being followed? But back to the point, I mean, the vast majority of the trash that's going to the oceans today is coming from China and the river. So that's probably the short answer is they're not doing what they need to do. Yeah.
What we can do here as HASC members is not use plastic at all. So we have reusable containers that you can bring in to get your water. And the plastic cups for the water should not be. We should have no cups at all there. So you have to bring in your own container, and the same for coffee. So we can eliminate plastic before it starts. So let's encourage each other to do that.
Speaking of that, since my wife has a plastic water bottle, I would tell you that any idea how many of these are consumed every minute around the world? 1 million a minute. 1 million a minute. 1 million a minute. So
And
to your point, let's get it down to 500,000 or none.
or none.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I would piggyback on that. And this group probably isn't as guilty as some in America, but because America loves cheap, they buy cheap Chinese stuff, and it just ends up broken and in the landfill or in the ocean. And so we need to really think through what we're spending our money on.
Yeah. I would tell you there's a lot of really great tech I'll jump into so we don't run out of time. Some great tech that I'll share with you guys. Just a couple small examples I'll get to here. You were asking about bioplastics. I think one thing, just so you guys are aware, there's different categories of bioplastics. The ones that we need to work towards using are the biodegradable bioplastics. Because there are other bioplastics that are, you can get they're a renewable resource, but they still end up in landfills. And they can be recycled, but they're not going to just go away on their own. And so these are the types of products. You guys have probably heard of polylactic acid, PHA, which I won't pronounce, but you can look it up, long word. Polylactic acid, PLA, comes from corn, essentially. And a long time ago, there was a big snacks company that launched a bag in PLA, got a lot of notoriety because it was incredibly loud when it crunched. If you remember that, I think it was Tostitos or Frito-Lay launched that. And so it took it out of market. Back to your point, like, well, it was a solution, a better solution, but the consumers were like, whoa, I don't want everyone to know I'm snacking at midnight when I go downstairs. So they pulled it from market and they put it back in the same old multi-layered bag that is not recyclable. PHA is a newer called resin technology that's made from microorganisms, and they feed on waste and they generate polymer. So again, a really neat newer one. Starch and cellulose are also used. The thing that the industry's trying to change here, because these have been in existence and people have been trying to use them. The difference here is trying to get them to the resins to be able to use them the same manufacturing method that is being used by plastics today. So how they're extruded, how they're blown, how they're laminated are different. And the challenge with these to date, although they're improving, is to get them to behave in the same way, running the same type of equipment that they use to make these cups or plastic bottles or other things. And there's still performance challenges. The good news is that it's been significant progress in this. Earlier, I talked about how many tons of plastic were made every year. Well, this past year, it's increasing every year, was 400 million tons. So I tell you, we've got a long way to go, but we're improving. A couple of years ago, 2.2 million tons of this was produced. So what success is going to look like when we're producing more of this than plastic, fossil-based plastic.
I don't know if you want to take off on this, but right here in front.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I know you have more things to say, but
Yeah.
some of us were born before plastic.
Yeah.
And we learned to use foil or wax paper or cloth diapers.
Yeah.
Is there a possibility that that kind of change, a plastic is so efficient and so simple and so satisfying.
Yeah.
The other question is, as a Michigan State grad from the packaging department, what's happening at the university level in terms of increasing the number of graduates who will go out and spread the story that you are telling and getting involved?
Great question. Your first one, I think you kind of answered. I mean, I think it's back to behavior. I mean, the more we can continue to encourage, you asked about plastic with plastic bags. I mean, we don't accept taking those from the store anymore. We have to go back and use those. That's behavior change while the technology catches up. The good news is it's hundreds of millions of dollars being invested in technology to solve these issues. And we're solving them. Industries are solving them around the globe, and with maybe the exception of China. But so we're making progress. And I think things like those behavior changes can help bridge the gap to just reduce the overall need for plastic while these technologies catch up. Legislation will help, but a lot of it comes from us just demanding something different, not accepting it. Because your point, plastic is the reason it's so ubiquitous is it's solves so many problems. It's cheap. It's just a problem. It's lightweight.
I have a question from home that I think goes along, and one of the big producers is biomedical waste, and what can be done in that industry since single use is necessary.
Yeah, I didn't even include that stuff in here. I mean, I did, I think, in one of the slides, but it's a massive contributor. So that and food and beverage are probably the two largest contributors of single-use plastics. There is a lot of work in that space. In fact, we're working with some companies, hospitals and others, to try and have different solutions. I mean, you just think about bedpans, right? Like just simple things like that don't have to be in plastic. plastic gloves. So there's a lot. I mean, there's feminine care. There's a lot of areas right now where companies are trying to find alternatives to plastic. Biomedical is still a big challenge.
In terms of legislation with the divided Congress like we've had for so many decades, it's difficult to do legislation. We've relied on regulatory agencies. If the Supreme Court decision around Chevron reduces the ability of the EPA to do that kind of regulation, are we just fakaka?
Listen, the good news is there's policies out there now, and states are starting to take ownership of these things. So I think the states are going to play a bigger role. And the good news, what we're starting to see, what I see is when states like California, Hawaii, New Hampshire, other places like that start, big companies, they don't have an option to segment what they produce and how they ship it. So what's going to California is going to have to go everywhere. So we're working with some really big customers right now that you guys would know very well, QSRs and others, that because Canada's changed, Canada's been very progressive like Europe, and states have started to change. They're being forced to change. And I think the other thing, back to the comments around us as consumers, we have to continue to demand. Our behaviors will say a lot, but yeah, it's not going to be easier. And the good news is there's a lot of stakeholders coming together that are well funded to continue to drive the research forward, to find the alternative solutions. And the companies want to go make those changes because they see the benefit of purchase behavior change. So let me over here. I want to just mention this company quick, New Lab. They're out of Detroit. Great company. If you guys get a chance, I would encourage you to look them up. There's a good friend of mine that works there. The reason I put stakeholder engagement on here is that they, like others, are playing a really integral role in how we problem solve. So they're a company, and they're not just in materials, but they're also in energy mobility, and they're trying to fight climate management. But on the material side, for them, it's all about reduction of plastics and single-use plastics. So what they do is they act as a hub, if you want to think about it that way. Well, they'll bring together stakeholders from around the globe to problem solve. And so the material space, one of the things they're developing is bioplastics, working with companies. And so they themselves don't develop anything, but they bring people together. So where there's a need, they'll bring the companies that have the need. They'll big foundations that have a lot of money that have interest in solving these problems. They'll go search for entrepreneurs that have developed the tech. They just need to find a way to scale it. And so they're a real interesting company. There's several other companies like that out there. We've started to work with them too to get access to some of these entrepreneurs. There's a lot of really smart people around the world that are doing some really neat things. And even if those entrepreneurs can work together. So they're a facilitator of these stakeholders to solve these big problems. And one of the areas they're focused on is plastics, which is awesome. And a couple of the technologies that their companies are working with, and this is the stuff that gives me a lot of excitement and hope. And again, these ultimately will be competitors of ours, but I don't care. There's so much need out there to get rid of the 400 million tons of plastic produced every year that we need a lot of people in this space to go solve it. These are two really neat companies that New Lab helped as a stakeholder, as a hub, to bring different industry partners and money to get these guys funded. So Sway, you can see they use seaweed, sargassum, and they turned it into resin pellets. What's neat about this, I was earlier talking about some of the challenges PLA and even PHA to some extent has on being able to adapt to current forming, blowing, extruding processes. These guys have figured out a way to develop resin that can fit into existing manufacturing. And they're doing it from a renewable resource like seaweed that actually is becoming more problematic. So we need to get rid of some of it anyway, and it renews itself very quickly. The other is Mango Materials, which is a fascinating company. What they do is they partner up with companies that are essentially burning off methane gas that would normally go in the environment. They recapture it, and they turn that methane gas into a biodegradable biopolymer, which is awesome. So again, really great technology out there. These are just two examples of the hundreds And if you go out to the new lab site and you look around, you'll see some of those, but there's other companies that are doing the same thing. But that's what gives you a lot of energy and excitement. And that's where we need more advocacy and support to support these kinds of groups. But there's big foundations that are supporting them and others. Yeah.
We discussed the universities and what kind of
Oh,
people are coming out of the universities. And I know a lot of like medical research and that kind of thing is done in the universities. Is some of this research coming out of the universities also?
There is, and I thank you for asking that because I didn't answer your question. So Michigan State, as an example, they're the largest school of packaging in the country. Clemson has a program that's doing really well as well. What's great about Michigan State, and more recently, they brought on a gentleman named Matt Dahm, who's now the department head, and actually now the interim dean of the College of Ag. But he's been back at Michigan State for about 2-3 years. I know Matt well because I went to grad school with him at Michigan State, and I went to visit him when he got there, and I hadn't been back to school in a while. So he's taking me on a tour through the School of Packaging in Michigan State. If you guys go to if you ever go up there and you want a tour around, reach out to me and I will get you a tour of the School of Packaging. It's fascinating now. But when I was there, it looked exactly like it did when I went to school, which is 3 or 4 years ago. Back in the 80s, it looked exactly the same. I probably saw you there. But it was funny, we were walking around, I kind of get to answer your question on kind of what they're doing and that, but he walked me around and we walked into the grad school or the grad office, which is about half the size of this. And I looked down at the carpet. I'm like, man, that looks like the exact same carpet that was here in 1988. It was the exact same carpet. And he and I were laughing because we sat next to each other. We had the same chairs were there. Same desk, right? It was a long time ago. No, they weren't in good condition when we were there. So what Matt has done at the School of Packaging in the last 2-3 years has been unbelievable. So he was in the industry for a long time, came back to help support and run the program. They just renovated in a massive part and added on to their facility, brought state-of-the-art technology in. He's got new and more professors in. They also just got approved a grant with the school to double the size of the building. So they're going to be adding on, but they've already they renovated it all. They brought in new professors to the professors they already had. So they're increasing staff. They're going to be doubling the size of the student population as they double the size of the building. And I just had him give a presentation to our company a few months ago to go through all the technology that they're working on. So they're taking like food waste and turning it into biopolymers, as an example. They got a huge, talk about industry turnaround. So Amcor is a massive plastics company, one of the largest in the world, Amcor. They just donated, I think, $30 million to Michigan State School of Packaging to build a sustainable packaging center because they know the direction they're headed is not sustainable. So they're investing in new solutions through Michigan State. So Michigan State in particular, other universities are going to play a much bigger role, but they've not had the funding they need. And now they're getting that because this is such an important area and people see the problem we have. So it's exciting. And, there's a lot more that will come out of the school. So great. Thanks for asking the question then. All right, the other thing you guys will hear about end of life. The most important thing when you're thinking about designing, developing, or using a package as a consumer is what is the end of the life of this thing? Does diapers don't have a good end of life? Or during life isn't good either, I guess, but the end of life, better. But there's companies like this. I was just on the phone with the founder of Lomi a few weeks ago. They're a British Columbia-based company. They've developed this technology. They've got, I think, about 200,000 users now of this. The one on the right is Mill. That's more for food. But Lomi, what they do is they'll take packaging, fiber-based packaging, along with the food scraps or things like that, and just a kitchen home compostable device turns it into soil. You just put back in your garden outside. So these are just a couple examples of companies that are working on making it easier for all of us to solve our own packaging end-of-life issues. And so we're working with them to figure out how do we create the right packaging solutions and partner with big retailers so that we can create more ubiquity out of these. But something to think about as you're going and shopping, like your bag, what's going to happen to this? There is no real good end of life for this other than a landfill or an ocean. But companies doing a lot of work here. Home composting is just one example. So getting to the end here, we kind of talked about this, and obviously you guys are engaged in this, but anything we can do to continue to be part of the change matters. And again, we got a long way to go from a tech, but simple things like this, the bag example is a good one. This isn't going to let me move to the next slide. One more slide here. Yeah, there it goes. Uh-oh. Why are you going to watch it again? I don't know, is Amy here? No, it's going to go forward too. Oh, there you go. Thank you. All right. Awesome. We got it. Thank you. All right. Back to the point on just kind of getting educated. Anybody know July is plastic-free month? Back to, I think, the question you raised too earlier, we've got to better communicate all of this as an industry, get more, not just the industry, but get more awareness out to all of these kinds of things. Because the fact that we've got this massive problem, we've got a month dedicated to it. Up until 6 months ago, even though I was working for a company in the industry, that's all we do. I didn't know this existed. So we've got an opportunity. But these are the kind of things that just we can constantly remind ourselves of. So that's what I had. This is my info. So love to thank you.
Well, we do have another half an hour, so as many questions as we can come up with, the better.
Oh, good. I thought we had an hour. I thought I was.
It is National Blueberry Month, so we may not know about it.
I didn't know that. Now I do. That's good.
I just found out about before I got here. Real specific, polyvinyl alcohol and water soluble film. This is my soap for the dishwasher. Does this really go into the ocean, or does it stay in the septic system or get caught in something else? I have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, eventually it's going to work its way. I mean, I think one of the bigger nanoplastic micro issues we have is things like toothpaste. It's things like that eventually gets in your drain and goes out. It's clothes washing and all the fibers, microfibers that come off your clothes. So I would guess that would probably be very similar.
I just read something that's causing a lot of issues with people's dishwashers and plumbers. I mean, I think that's what they were talking about in the article I read, that stuff actually clogs your pipes. So I would investigate before you buy any more.
Yeah, but to your point, it's a great consumer solution. But it has its challenges. But your specific question, I'll go find out. Yeah, we've read a lot of research about clothes washing and just habits that we have every day, brushing teeth, things like that, and the impact those are having. That's a good one. I got to look into that. Good question. Yeah.
I can vouch for polyvinyl alcohol. Those pouches actually dissolve and pretty much go away that way. Ultimately, it'd be biodegraded in the sewer system. In fact, polyvinyl alcohol is used in a lot of the coatings that provide the properties that you want in your soup bowls.
Yeah. Part of the challenge is what's inside the package too. It's part of the issue, but yeah.
I know you talked about Michigan State and working with some of the solutions in the packaging program. Now, if you would know how much of the program is still devoted to the current industry and plastic producers, are they still educating the people who are producing plastic packaging?
Yeah, if your question is some of the curriculum still about, yeah, it is. I mean, they've made continued changes and they've added things around sustainable packaging and things like that that didn't exist, several years ago. There is still part of the curriculum about polymers and plastics, but part of that's understanding how they work and how they operate so you can find solutions around them. The good news is that those big companies like Amcor are investing in ways that they know that they've got to find alternate solutions. But if that's your question, is there still curriculum that teaches that? Yes. Well, I would tell you where all the research is going is to sustainable solutions. So very little. I mean, for years it used to be on how do I make something cheaper? How do I find a less expensive plastic? How do I I would guess that's probably gone now. And now the focus all literally, because we just went through the research that they're focused on, and they were using like orange peels for trying to find package for food waste in the packaging. They had different types of resins that dissolved. There's some time-lapse resins that are out there now, because one of the biggest challenges with some of the biodegradable bioplastics is their properties. So you want them to dissolve, but if you expose them to moisture, then they dissolve and they don't provide the performance you need. But if you can get something that dissolves over time, or it's got some trigger, like some conditions have to be met before it dissolves, is what you want. So there's companies out there that have some time lapse. There's companies that have different biodegradable bioplastics that will dissolve over time in different conditions. Composting, you guys are probably aware, 99% of anything that you say is compostable. Like there's coffee cups now that say compostable, this one doesn't. They're not, unless they're in an industrial composter under very certain conditions, and there's very few of those around. That's the problem. So what we need to design to are things that it could fall in the water, it's going to dissolve. It falls out the window of your car and is on the side of the road, and it's eventually going to go away. Those are the solutions we need. So, yeah.
Speaking from plastic bottles, in addition to the problems to the environment, is there a concern about ingesting plastic? And is there more of a concern, like I lived for 20 years in Las Vegas, and I see a plastic bottle that's been in 115-degree heat for a week at a store. Am I drinking plastic?
So I mean, careful what I say here. This is probably being recorded. I would tell you the research is beginning to suggest, yes, that we know there's off-gassing. We know certain conditions, temperature, pressure, light will accelerate that process. So there is more and more research and indication that things like plastic bottles, there's just some research that came out a few weeks ago I saw, there is an indication that those are getting into your system. Now, a lot more has to be done, and also done on what the implications of that are. Do they eventually get out of your system? But the founder of the company that I'm with now, he was with Intel. And the reason that he and his co-partner decided to start this company 10 years ago was because they were making these big plastic containers to hold silicone chips to protect them. And those big plastic containers, based on the environment they were in, were off-gassing, and worried about impact of the environment and the people and things like that. So they left Intel and started this company to try to find solutions, even for silicone chips. How can we package them in a way that doesn't create more plastic problems? But so, you know.
So just a comment is that you talked about plastic bags.
Yeah.
So I don't know, for probably 15 years, I was in the food industry for a lot of years, and the trunks or the backs of our cars, we probably have 10 different reusable grocery bags that we take into, whether we go into Target or any place we go, we use them. And I'm really, just talking about things that we all can do. Yeah. I'm continue to be amazed how many people don't use them, because it really is quite convenient, and you don't have that waste and so forth. In fact, we have them, we're wearing them out because of the age of the bags that we've been using. And so, I really encourage people to do it, but I'm always amazed to see how few people do. So
Well, thank you for doing that. And you're right. And, you know, we've got to just continue to raise our voice on that. Absolutely. Yeah, I can repeat your question. Go ahead. Yeah. Yeah.
Ma'am, the people online can't hear a thing you're saying until you wait for a microphone.
Sorry, I didn't really see the microphone.
I just wanted to know how long does that take to break down and in what conditions? The one that you guys produce, is it resin? Is that what you call it? The fiber bowl?
It's a fiber bowl. Yep. Yeah. So, well, again, it depends on depends on the condition. If you were to bury it in a landfill, it's going to take longer, right? If you throw it in an ocean or some salt water, it's going to go away relatively quickly. Again, depends on temperatures and things like that, but it's designed to go away. It's industrial compostable. I mean, we just produced a very light package for a big company called Taylor Farms. They're a big produce supplier. They're like 80 share of the category. You guys see their brand, probably Taylor Farms, but they supply the vast majority of all the private label. So Meyer will buy their lettuce greens. They're in these big plastic tubs today. We're transitioning them over to fiber-based tubs. So we've done some home compostable experiments with them to make sure that, and their employees have done them because that's how passionate their team is to move on. But they want to get to a solution that they knew they could put in a compost and was just going to go away. So home compost. Yeah. Yeah.
Please raise your hand and wait for my microphone.
We
Here's the next one here.
Composting is a tricky thing though, because if you, and if there's, you know, there's an experiment for it, you send it in and they certify it. The challenge I have a little bit with some of that, which is good. I'm glad we're doing that. But there could be like a size of a nanoparticle that hasn't yet broken down over the course of the 30 days, and then you don't get the certification. So then we're trying to redesign stuff to like get that last piece. But if they waited 4 days longer, it would go away. So I'm like, can we just say it's compostable in 38 days instead of 30 days? But there is at least some methodology that is being used for the industry. And I think we all got to get to a place where things are breaking down on their own. That's the ultimate solution, because we're never going to spend enough or have the capacity and infrastructure in place to compost in an industrial way. It's just not sustainable, I don't think.
I have several questions from online that refer to the local grocery stores. So Meyer and Family Fare collect plastic bags for recycling, but they also collect plastic film. And how is that recycled? If you're aware, what I heard was that they make it into like decking that's composite materials.
Yeah, plastic film is a tricky one. So it depends. So there's monolayer materials that are recyclable, like a polyethylene, a polypropylene, when it's one layer. The challenge is a lot of things like snack packaging or things like that are multi-layer, and it's very hard to get those to come apart. Some may even say recyclable on them, but the likelihood of them being recycled is very low. And to your point, there's a lot of companies, decking's a good one. We talked about clothing. There's a lot of companies making industrial components like fence posts out of recycled material. And that's why the more we can get even in plastics, the things that are monolayer, even in the food industry, you know, is better, because those can be recycled and have a chance to be recycled. Yeah, good question. Yeah.
I am not a cynic, but I'm thinking if it takes 500 years for some of these to break down, what's happening on the education level? Are we starting with preschoolers? Are we starting with school kids who will grow up with the idea when we are so reluctant to accept change with the climate?
Yeah.
How are we going to get people to change with the convenience of plastic?
Well, the good news is things like universities are now all headed in that direction. We got to get it down. I mean, part of the reason I went to change jobs is my daughter. She's like, are you just going to make food for the rest of your life? Or are you going to do something important? I'm like, I'm trying to feed people. So, yeah. So, but your point, this generation, right? Our kids, I mean, they get it. They know change has to happen. They want to find jobs where they can impact. Our company and we have this healthy planet, healthy people kind of vision model that was put out, it attracts a lot of talent and young talent. They want to come work for companies that want to make change. So it's not hard for us to find terrific young talent coming out of schools. We do internships and some co-op stuff and things like that, but that people want to work for companies that want to make change. So that's what's good. At your point about getting it down, I can't tell you how that's happened or whether it's happened enough, but I can tell you, we know it's not enough. We know it's not enough. Yeah. Yeah.
I can address one thing about that at Hope College, the summer science camps. The first day that they do an orientation with the children in the camp every single week, they talk about recycling. We get the blue recycling out. Can I tell you, I didn't have to dumpster dive as they threw out, stuff, but I believe if grandparents, parents, and educators try to, because our grandkids live in Seattle, they would be appalled if they saw some of the things that get thrown away here because they have grown up with that.
Yeah.
And if we're trying, that's only, but hope is good with recycling and composting and the like.
Yeah.
So at least I can tell you that one special little area.
Right.
How is the state of Michigan doing in regulation and encouragement on recycling? I know we have the bottle law, and that's been around for a long time. I think that was to stop litter, but it doesn't solve my embarrassing bottle here. I do have a water bottle, Yeti in my car that I forgot. So that's why I had to resort to this. But how is the state of Michigan doing compared to other states?
I don't know. I will tell you that the state's been leaders in a lot of ways. I mean, back to the can recycling, it's been going on for how many years? I mean, that was one of the first, right, states to start that. But, yeah, which is right. So I would say Michigan's been fairly progressive, not like California and different examples, but I don't know. It's a good question. I don't have a good answer for you. Yeah.
Last time I asked you a question about the big panda. Now I'd like to ask you a question about the big gorilla.
Okay.
Which is polystyrene. Where's it going? Is it people really looking at getting rid of it like they should? Is it just hanging around? I know when you look at how much is being used in China, it's absolutely astronomical, and that's such a big problem.
It's a massive problem, and it kind of goes back to some of the other plastics. They all have their role in different industries for different reasons. Polystyrene in particular is been a tough one to get rid of.
Cheap.
It's incredibly cheap. It off gases a lot. There's a lot of focus on it. The previous company I worked with, I can tell you there's a lot of work being done to get rid of it, get out of it. But things like yogurt containers, and it's a multi-layer too with polystyrene, provides oxygen barrier, moisture barrier, all kinds of things. Those are hard to replace. But some of the technology I've referenced up here that companies are working on will eventually get there. But it's a massive problem. It's a massive problem. And I will tell you, just in the behalf of all the big companies and even the big packaging suppliers are doing plastic. Because I know a lot of them, they're working really hard to solve these as well. They know that they got to solve, and they're working hard to solve them. Yeah.
I just have a real short anecdote. Like almost 50 years ago, I was practicing law, and I had a person come in my office to start a guardianship. And the reason she said her sister was crazy, the first thing she said was she bought water. So she's saying she had this water bottle, she purchased it. She didn't get water out of the tap. And I need to do a conservatorship because she's wasting money. But think of 50 years now, it's not a water bottle. It's like ubiquitous.
Yeah.
And then it was like, I need a conservatorship because she's ridiculously spending money.
$1 million a minute. $1 million a minute. Yeah.
You touched on it, and I know this isn't the focus of your talk, but I really think the primary thing we need to be educating and pushing in America is reducing. We are such gluttonous consumers in our country, and we're buying way more than we need to.
Yep.
And I think it's even worse in the younger generation from what I'm seeing.
Oh, way worse.
Yeah. So I think that we need to reduce first, and then all of these.
I agree with you. And I think that back to this discussion about bridging the gap between, we need the technologies to catch up. They're going to continue to take time. 100%. Yeah. Not many.
Yeah, for years it's been reduce, reuse, and then recycle.
Yeah.
And the first two are much more important than the last
Yeah.
one, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the first big indicators are going to be when less and less plastics being produced every year. I mean, there's big indicators out there that we'll see, we'll know. And anything we can do to reduce, like these folks are doing back here, not taking the plastic bags to the store. But how many kids, like younger kids generation, do we see carrying water bottles around? Yeah, I mean, it's most of them are all carrying containers around that are reusable. Very few people, young adults, do you ever see walking around with a plastic water bottle? If it is, it's one that's reused. Yeah.
On one of your slides about alternative materials, there was starch and cellulose, but you didn't say anything about those. Could you make a comment about those?
Yeah, they're used as well, they're used as part of a matrix oftentimes in making the biopolymers. So they're a source to make biopolymers. Sugar cane's another one that's used to make biopolymers. So they'll make films that they can extrude and laminate into bags and things like that. The problem is that the window of use is not very big, so the application use isn't very big. That's why I said of all of those things, the last stat I saw was only 2 million metric tons of those purchased versus the 400 million of the other, right? So that's why. And starch has been around for a while. It's been used as a plastic source for replacement for a while. It's got challenges on its properties and the ability to hold out moisture, to flex and not crack. It's just but it is still used. Cellulose sand. Yeah.
Any other questions?
This isn't really a question, it's an opinion. I've spent the last 35 years summering in Europe. So I've watched this transition in Europe. And it wasn't popular when it happened, but it was legislated.
Mm-hmm.
And in America, we would say, oh my gosh, they can't tell me I can't have plastic, and we'd have riots. In West Michigan, particularly, you can't tell me what to do. So I think that's part of the problem is education and attitude. It's not easy, and you don't get a whole population to buy onto something that's this big a change. I think we need to support legislation that will bring these things in.
Yeah. Yeah, your comment about Europe is a good one. There's all kinds of things that they're doing differently now. The environment's different, right? Your shopping trips are more frequent. You're not buying as many groceries. The behaviors are very different. It's much more mobile society, right? On how you think about people getting around, especially with walking and bikes, and things are very different. But and I think because of that, I've said, hey, our access to resources is a lot less as well. So we've got to change. Now, to your point, I'm sure not everyone in Europe was happy with that. They're not happy now when they go there and they start having to pay 50 cents more for a cup of coffee. But now they're demanding change. I'm not going to pay 50 cents, so you guys better find a solution for me. And I don't want to have to sit in a coffee shop. I want to be able to take my coffee and walk. So you're right. I mean, that's why recycling rates in Europe are incredibly high, but the use, your point, is way less. So it's a very different situation there, and they've been much more progressive. And it's why we're building a plant in Poland to help support those countries, because they're leading, there's no doubt. And there's certain states here that are starting to try and approve. And again, you can't legislate everything in. We've got to do some things different too as an industry. We've got to encourage industry to change, but legislation certainly can help.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah.
I'm not a scholar, but I do remember a long time ago hearing that the skin is the largest organ in our body. Now, those of us who use a lot of products, creams, lotions, makeups, and a number of other products that we slather on our skin all the time, are we ingesting microplastics through our skin?
I would say on the whole, there's been a lot of studies, a lot of research done, even on things like sunscreens this time of year and lotions. And I would say there had been some lotions, creams, things like that, that people were using for some period of time that have now been outlawed. There was some issues with it. I would think on whole now with the amount of research and science that goes into it, I don't think so, but I would have to do a little bit more research and get back to you on that. But there's a lot of legislation, policies related to the ability to launch a new product that you put on your skin for those reasons. Now, it doesn't mean that we won't find out in 20 years that something is causing a problem, but there's certainly a lot of focus on it. Yeah. It's generally treated like pharmaceuticals. So.
Anyone else?
Curious, what is the industrial process between taking a cup like this that I got out in our lobby and turning that into something else? Like, you pelletize the plastic, or you have to heat them? And I just wonder what the process is to take recyclable plastic and make some other plastic part out of it.
There's a couple different techniques they use to break it down. I mean, a lot of it, they'll do like electrolysis to break it down. They'll use combination of heat and some UV to break it down. It depends on what the plastic is, will change. But they essentially try to break it back down to its original form. Right. And then they'll recombine it. And so there's several different techniques that they use to do that. Yeah. Yeah. But it's partly why every time they do that, the properties on that are way less. So if you're drinking a cup, they may be able to turn it into a cup one more time, but then they won't be able to turn it into a cup again because they can't polymerize it, won't act like a plastic. They can't extrude it anymore. So they try to turn it into a fence post or something else that can just stay. But yeah. Well,
Okay, well, Corey, I need to thank you.
thank you guys.